Hello, this is Chance Dunlap down here in Texas. I'm going to talk about some old homemade fishing lures in my collection. These particular pieces are all pretty large. This one in my hand's the smallest of this group. I don't have any specific information about any of these, but I do have some location information that I believe to be fairly accurate, and I'll talk about that. This bait, though, I really don't know anything about, other that it has gone from a couple of major folk art fishing lure collector collections, has found its way into mine. This piece is just kind of off the charts cool. Musky fishing, we don't have that in Texas. We supposedly have some pike, but I have never seen one in any of our waters personally. But you go up north and they have pike in large quantity and size as well. And then, of course, you have the muskellunge, the fish of, 10,000 cast, the large toothy predator fish, probably the most significant predatory fish in North American waters. Those are, kind of an elite sport fish, and there are lots of fishing lures made specifically to catch those fish. They really are iconic and prestigious. They have been for, 150 years and even possibly longer than that, in the general, sport fishing consciousness. This bait, I imagine, was created with musky in mind. You take a note, these heavy duty single hooks, single shank hooks, there's no other shank soldered onto these. So they're just single shank. They have this little shoulder protector cut from, a piece of bent sheet metal secured with some screws. Has another screw in there actually holding the eye of the hook. This right side of the bait has the same exact setup. It's just offset, which is kind of interesting. And then the rear hook back here is set into a notch in the body. And check out that old square little bolt there. Has a, it's cut square into the body, and they fit that steel head right into the body of the bait. So has a screw here on the side to keep the hook from jumping up, higher than it needs to be to keep it in where you might want to engage the mouth of the fish. And then, really the only thing about this that sort of references any vintage factory bait is this collar up here on the head, and it's a little bit like early heading experts that collectors call the slope nose baits, and then later on the heading 210, kind of a lot smaller, kind of casting size lure. I don't know exactly the age of this particular piece, but I believe it goes back quite a good ways. The line tie is interesting. It's kind of a flat looking bit of metal. I'm not sure if it's soldered in some way. I don't have an x-ray of this piece to really know what's going on inside of it. Has a couple of lead weights. You can see where the paint's kind of chipped off. But it, has that simple paint, almost abstract chipmunk maybe. Chipmunk, baby ducks, large bait fish, suckers, really anything can become food for a big pike and musky. So these lure makers knew that. Has a little wire leader out here. I think musky baits probably stimulate the imagination, as much or more than any other kind of fishing lures. They have big size, they're large in scale, with a lot of cool parts and pieces and big heavy hooks. They're really something you can hold in your hand very tactily, and think about them and kind of try to imagine what whoever made this thing was thinking about. I don't know exactly where this one was made. I don't have any documentation, but the fact that it has 3 hooks maybe leads you to believe that maybe New Jersey might be a place to look, because New Jersey had a 3 hook point law for a long time in regards to artificial casting baits. They couldn't have more than 3 hook points, so this one has 3 hook points. Some lures would have a single treble hook, which is a single hook itself, but it has 3 different shanks soldered in one place, and there's double hooks and things. So so maybe, but I just think this is a super cool piece that I've never really seen another quite like it. Wisconsin and Michigan, Minnesota, famous for some musky fishing and famous for factory lures being made for such, and lots of folk art lures being made. A lesser known lake for musky is in New York, in the kind of southwestern corner, not too far from Lake Erie, across from Canada, really not far from Pennsylvania at all. And then, of course, Ohio's over there, a little farther west. This particular bait and these other 2 laying here are supposedly hail from the area of Chautauqua Lake, which is very famous in that area. A couple of the most famous, American-made baits that are very, very collectible were made in that area. And there's also a tradition of musky spearing on that lake. Musky spearing was outlawed in New York State, I believe around 1905. And so before then, you could go out onto the frozen ice, cut a hole in it, make an artificial lure that you would dangle on a string, and you'd try to attract a fish into its area, and then you would drop a spear down on top of the fish. And they still do spearing in other places, but it's been outlawed in New York for well over 100 years. And so once spearing was outlawed, maybe casting baits became more popular. People would have to change the way they were going to, get some of these big fish if they needed to. So maybe that stimulated some of the drive to create cool, casting or trolling lures specifically to target, big muskies. This one's really cool. I had really wanted this one a long time, and the gentleman who had it in his collection for a few decades, he unfortunately passed away, and I was able to acquire it. This bait's really big in scale. I mean, its body's really wide. It's got these couple metal paddles that are soldered onto a steel rod that go through the body. Has some glass eyes that give it a nice appeal. The paint is really nice. It's got this kind of yellow ochre kind of sides with some gold splotchy stuff, and the back's mostly green, kind of streaky with the gold, little brushwork going on. Kind of simple, but effective. A little bit of red accents going on, and this cut face with the bait would kind of pull into the water and kind of do a diving wiggle maybe, and then you would think these paddles might make a little action too. There's a lot of imagination here. Even the form of it kind of has this curved belly down here, almost like it's some kind of like a pregnant fish, or maybe even more of like a big amphibian or something, or maybe even a bird. The tail is this, heavy bristle hairs. They have a big staple, and the hair goes into the body. A couple of big treble hooks, typical, 3 shanks soldered onto 1 unit. This bait's kind of big and bad. And unfortunately, a lot of these homemade lures, they do have some wear and tear on them. They sat around, they weren't really painted appropriately with materials that were archival or meant to last, and maybe they rattled around in a box or hung up in an old shed where it was hot, it was cold, but all collectors can do is try to get them as they are, and try to maintain them the best that we can in the condition that we get them, to be stewards of them for a bit. These other 2 fishing lures are also thought to come from Lake Chautauqua, and they reference some other pieces that are out there in the field. This big bait here has this, let me get it untangled, has this long wire leader and this big body that, you know, rotates on this wire shaft. I as a lure maker have found this thing to be just incredibly inspiring, and just sort of wacky in a way. Has this metal propeller at the front that would cause the body to spin. Simple paint, just gold and red, kind of classic. Has a single shank hook here on this, you know, one loop on the wire belly. Has a double shank back here. This hook pops up in Chautauqua Lake attributed inline kind of spinning spoon baits a lot. These two heavy shanks, they kind of have this straight, you know, the bend is this kind of elongated curve, and then the shank's just very straight. And I've seen this hook a bunch of times from that area. This particular two lures have the whatever kind of feathers those are. That's actually wire holding that on there. It's not, you know, string that you would expect, you know, finely tied fishing flies to be. You know, I love this spinner that's on here. It's homemade. It's, you know, it has you can see that 100 on there, and some kind of a old gauge readout, but it's heavy brass. You know, somebody cut that out and formed it, you know, repurposed some kind of old found object. So, I mean, I think that's pretty neat. Some kind of simple, if not crude soldering of some copper wire. And I mean, just look at that. You know, this thing's just homemade in every way. I mean, except for, you know, the hooks themselves are not homemade, but I mean, the rest of it's very, you know, thoughtfully ingenious. I know of 3 or 4 others of this big inline body bait. I only know of a couple of its companion piece. I determined years ago that these had to be made by the same person because the hooks are the same kind of hooks. They both have a single shank hook in the belly. They have a double at the rear. The wire wrapping is consistent. You know, consistent metalworking quality, paint quality. Very, very easy to kind of see that once you see it, you're like, oh, okay, they've got to be related. This bait's not as big as the other one, but it has this really cool fit sheet metal lip that notches into the belly. It's not just stuck on the outside. And this scooped out mouth is actually hollowed out. See, you can actually see the blue of my table through there. So as you would pull this thing through the water, the line ties here, and it would, you know, in theory, it would engage into the surface tension of the water and probably wiggle a little, and hopefully water would be forced through here. In later lures, they call that a sonic action. I don't know if that's an official name or not anywhere, but that's what collectors refer to it as. And there's actually some lures that have that name in the title. So again, it has this wire goes through the body, but it has some kind of a nail or something that goes across here. That's, you can kind of see it down in there. Has some lead weight. You know, I just think these are all super cool fishing lures that, you know, I'm really glad to have in my collection. And, you know, definitely above average, not necessarily the best there are, but they're definitely really, really good in my opinion. And they really enhance my collection. So I appreciate you tuning in, and maybe some other videos are on the horizon. Thanks.